All right, it is time to welcome in NFL Nation reporter for the Houston Texans, DJ Bien-Anime. First of all, how are you doing? How's it going? You guys just lost someone to New England. So what's the temperature down in Texas right now?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me. I would say the temperature is pretty fine. Like Texas fans expected Stefon Diggs to be elsewhere once they traded for Christian Kirk. The Texans were never going to pay over $20 million per year for a receiver that's turning 32 this year, coming up with torn ACL. They did want to bring him back on a team-friendly deal, but once it was very clear how far off they were numbers-wise, that made sense why they went after Christian Kirk. And now Stefon Diggs is going to be in New England, and I think that Stefon Diggs could be a pretty nice piece for Drake May.
Okay, I love you already alluding to that. We're going to do a full circle kind of story time here because it's almost a year ago now. April 3rd is when the Texans acquired Stefon Diggs from the Bills. But what I need to know from you is what was the temperature initially when this trade was made? He was coming off of a 1,000-plus yard season. He was a key asset and workhorse for the Bills, but there was a lot of conversation around whether or not, temperature-wise and attitude-wise and locker room-wise, if he was a fit. So the initial reaction when he ended up heading down to the Texans.
Yeah, I thought when he originally got traded to the Texans, I believed that, okay, the Texans are trying to go win the Super Bowl. That was my initial thought. And it made sense, right? CJ Stroud had a great rookie year. D'Amico Ryan's great debut head coaching season. You hit on Will Anderson's. Their thing was starting to come along. You had some offensive line pieces, at least you thought. You just need to upgrade a few spots. And you had Nico Collins, Tank Dell, really give CJ Stroud three basically borderline 1,000-yard receivers that could, make a very, very prolific passing attack. And at that point, they already had Joe Mixon. So it was really, that's why a lot of people thought CJ Stroud could be an MVP type of quarterback in 2025. Obviously, the offensive line got in the way of that, and some Bobby Slowick, which is why the offensive line is drastically different. And Bobby Slowick is no longer in Houston. But when he got to the Texans, he ingratiated himself greatly. A lot of the narrative surrounding Stefon Diggs, it's kind of hoopla, in all honesty. I was kind of surprised how well he fit with guys based off of what the narrative was. Even down to like how he interacts with media, like he talks to media members. It might not always be on the record, but if you want to actually on background, he'll talk to you. He doesn't think he's above anybody. I remember when there was a lot of discussion about getting media members out of the locker room from the NFLPA. He was one of the guys on the Texans that said, nah, let's keep it what it is. So obviously I'm always going to be grateful to Stefon for that. But when it comes to his teammates, always having guys by his locker, always conversing with guys, never ever butted heads with CJ. Him and CJ had a great relationship. CJ and Steph went to France to practice and throw some routes when Steph was getting ready for his fashion week. He is very, very big into fashion and watches, that's for sure. You guys will see that fairly quickly. But yeah, the temperature when they brought in Steph was they're trying to go for it, win the Super Bowl.
I love that you painted the perfect picture there because you mentioned the initial excitement saying, okay, this could be a championship caliber team and roster with this guy coming in as an addition. But more importantly, you talk about the fact that he's so open to the media. He's all about supporting what journalists have to do. And then you also mentioned CJ Stroud. So let's stick with that for a second because Stroud being a young quarterback, especially this previous season, a lot of weight on his shoulders, a lot of expectation. He needed to take another step. Kind of have a similar situation going on here in New England. Drake May, young quarterback, sophomore season. That's almost one of the most crucial points in a young quarterback's career. So journalistically, did you ever see or hear of any conversations between CJ Stroud and Stefon Diggs or just, leadership or advice or just why Stroud gravitated towards him so much outside of him just being his wide receiver?
Well, I would say mainly because Steph, one thing that gets misconstrued is Steph really wants to win. Obviously wants to get paid too, but he really, really wants to win. I think there's I've covered a few NFL wide receivers. I've been covering the league since 2021. I haven't met a receiver as competitive as Stefon Diggs is. I remember one time in the training camp practice when the fans were there, had to be early August. It was red zone period, and Stefon Diggs catches like a spot route or a hitch or whatever. Let's just call it a hitch. And he catches the ball, he turns it up, and he dives into the end zone, gets up and gets in the face of Kamara Lassiter, who was a pretty standout rookie for the Texans in 2024. So one thing I've noticed is his competitive edge, and CJ also has an ultra competitive edge. So those two connected off of that. And also, CJ is really good at ingratiating himself with all kinds of people. It doesn't matter what position you're at, whether you're a practice squad guy, backup left tackle, star receiver. There's plenty of times I've seen CJ kind of hold mini Bible studies with the backup linebackers at his locker. So him and Steph are always going to mesh because CJ knows how to mesh with people from all walks of life. So that relationship was working up until he got hurt. Because even in the game where he got hurt, he was on pace to have one of his best games as a Texan. Unfortunately, he got hurt in the third quarter against the Colts, and the Texans missed him, sorely missed him throughout the rest of the year.
Yeah, that can definitely deflate the air and the energy that was really kind of surrounding Stefon Diggs and the role that he needed to play for the Texans. I love that you mentioned the fact that he didn't only integrate with CJ Stroud, he integrated with other players. And one of the other headlines, as you said, that could be misconstrued is that they didn't know how he'd handle being wide receiver 2, per se, heading into this locker room. So how can you say that he handled that? And again, just kind of like the tone, the conversation, because we saw a lot of passionate clips of him on the sideline. And I don't mean passionate as in competitive or bad attitude. I mean passionate as in getting guys going, keeping their heads in the game. Even if there was kind of a rough play call or decision made in a crucial moment, he was really trying to keep everyone's head in it. So talk about his ability to kind of adapt to that wide receiver too.
Oh, yeah, nah. I was kind of worried about that too. But since he got enough targets, he was always going to be happy. But he was really supportive of Nico Collins' growth and Nico Collins' maturation into being, at that point, on pace to be an all-pro receiver. And so he got hurt, missed 5 games, but still ended up with 1,000 yards. So I would say Stefon kind of took on that leadership role. And Stefon isn't stupid. Like, if he sees another dog producing, he knows that's only going to help him. So he doesn't necessarily have to be, quote-unquote, wide receiver 1. And he knew, based off of the role that he was in and where he was placed a lot, because he spent a lot of time in the slot. I believe 52% of his snaps, according to Next Gen Stats, were in the slot. He knew, okay, I'm going to still get my touches, but my touches aren't going to be down the field. So it was kind of like, yin and yang for Nico and Steph, where Steph would do more of the intermediate short stuff and Nico would be more of the deep threat. So he was fine with that because Steph has been in those situations where whether it was Steph and Adam Thielen or Steph and Cole Beasley, granted, in Buffalo, he was the clear number 1. But he's been in situations where he's had to share the rock. And again, Steph wants to win. You know what I'm saying? Like, Steph really, 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 really wants to win. That's all he truly cares about is winning. Obviously, again, he wants to get paid against his touches, but winning is for sure number 1. And if he doesn't feel like you can win anymore, that's when things get a little rocky. But that never happened in Houston to where he didn't feel like they could win.
Now, breaking that down just a little bit more, because you can understand that from a competitive level. You don't want to put the work in. You don't want to, get up early, work your body to the bone, and feel like there's not a potential reach here of a championship or to win, as you put it. The Patriots are more so in a rebuild fashion over here, and the trajectory is looking at that 3 to 5 year picture. And yes, money talks, but seeing what you saw in terms of his leadership caliber, his passion, the fact that he wants to win, the fact that he is competitive, how's that going to translate in your mind to New England, seeing as how we've got some time here before we might reach that point?
If I had to guess, he's probably going to look at Drake May a little bit how he looked at Josh Allen coming in to Buffalo. Because again, like Drake May and Josh Allen have a lot of similar traits. Obviously, Josh Allen is like the 1% in terms of pure talent, but Drake May has a lot of similar, skill sets in terms of the creativity off script, the arm strength, the ability to throw from different arm slots, the ability to throw when the pocket's getting muddy, the ability to still be able to throw down the field when the pocket is collapsing. So I think he's going to see that talent and be able to uplift that. And again, if Stefon is hooping and doing what he's got to do, then the pitcher's going to have a much, much better chance at winning. So I think that as long as he feels like everybody's committed to winning, people want to win, it'll be fine, even if the W's aren't showing up. So, because I remember, when the Texans, granted, at that point, they were, 5-1, and they went to Green Bay and they lost. They actually lost kind of badly on offense. At least it was a close game, but the offense didn't show up. He was still, upbeat, cheerful. And that was a game where he got into it with Jair Alexander before the game, and that was a national story throughout that day. But he was still, post-game, still encouraging guys, still being upbeat, things of that nature. Because again, if he felt like the team has a chance to win, he's good. And I think based off a lot of moves that the Patriots have made, they brought in a lot of veterans that have won at various places, right? Like the defensive tackle the Patriots just picked up, he just won a Super Bowl, right? Obviously, they brought in Harold. He's had success, and he's been on teams that went to the AFC Championship game, right? So, like, the Patriots have guys that know what it's like to win. And if he's around guys like that, he's going to be just fine.
I love it. It sounds like basically he just needs the buy-in, at least the foundational part of the buy-in in order to get things going. Now, you kind of started to talk about comparisons between Drake May and Josh Allen, but the most important thing, at least what stood out to me during training camp heading into this previous season, was Drake May has that risk it factor. He doesn't mind going for some of those big plays, and fans here want to know, can Stefon Diggs still be a deep threat? Can he still match pace down the end of the field? You're making some faces, so let's put some minds either at ease or bring us down to reality. What do we think in terms of a big threat?
I think he can still be a deep threat at times, but I think that where he's going to be at his best is kind of more that short intermediate aspect. Granted, in Houston, a lot of the routes that he ran down the field came out of the slot, so that's not necessarily like the position where it's conducive for that. But coming off a torn ACL, hitting closer to age 32, I expect him more. I categorize receivers as in three levels: 1 level receiver, 2 level receiver, 3 level receiver. 3 level receiver is a guy that can win at the first, second, and third level. Some guys can only win at the 1 and 2. Some guys only at the 1. He's more in that 2.5-ish range. I still think, like, based off of his injury, because again, I know I did mention that he did tear his ACL. It wasn't like a devastating knee injury. It was more like non-contact, and those are easier, in my opinion, to come back from. He's already been running, working on things of that nature. So I think he can be more like that 2.5-ish range where he can still be an effective wide receiver. I still do think the Patriots probably have to draft a guy. If you want a guy specifically for deep threat stuff, you're probably going to draft somebody. Maybe like like Boyd out of or Bond out of Texas, or Golden. Regardless, probably going to draft somebody specifically for that role. But I think in terms of the intermediate, short game, Stefon can still be effective there.
Yeah, he's known to be a pretty savvy route runner, and coming over to a system such as Josh McDaniels should be beneficiary in that. But you mentioned age. You mentioned what you saw leading up to the injury. Is there still hope that he can be that effective route runner for the team such as the New England Patriots?
Absolutely. I think him and Josh McDaniels are going to be able to make magic to an extent. I think that I've seen what Josh McDaniels did with I think it's Jacoby Myers, and he was able to make him borderline 1,000-yard receiver. I don't believe he ever got over 1,000 yards, but he was able to produce in New England. And obviously, he went to Vegas with Josh eventually. But I think that Josh can utilize guys with Stefon Diggs' skill set. We've seen it with Wells Welker. We've seen it with Julian Edelman. We've seen it with Myers. So I think, without question, that pairing can work with Josh McDaniels, Drake May, and Stefon Diggs. Yeah, I think he could be a very productive wide receiver.
All right, you're starting to put some minds at ease. Now, you kind of already touched on this in the opening here on Foxborough Rush, but the money, obviously, $69 million, 26 guarantee. And you mentioned the fact that there was a bit of a gap in conversation and negotiations when it came to even keeping him down in Houston. Stroud sounded like he was advocating for him to stay in that locker room, which also speaks to the character and why he wanted to continue playing with a guy like that. But kind of talk us through what you saw coming before he ended up landing this contract with the Patriots and getting an opportunity to grab that kind of money. Is it too much money for a player who's getting up there in age and coming off of injury?
I wouldn't say it's too much money. I'm always a big proponent of, if someone wants to pay you that, then that's what your market is, and somebody's willing to pay him that. So I think that the Texans tend to, when it comes to free agents at least, outside the Neil Hunter, they tend to be more, not necessarily on the frugal side, but they try to get good deals in that aspect. So I think it's more about that than anything. The people that they'll spend top dollar for are the people that they drafted. And obviously they did not draft Stefon Diggs. And they kind of signaled what last year was going to be when they cut the end of his contract, because in all honesty, that was a very, very team-friendly deal. But they kind of set up for it to be a 1-year rental, and that's what it ended up being. So I always thought that, since he made 22 last year for the Texans, when Nico make it 24, they knew they had to kind of spread that money elsewhere. because they moved off of Laramie Tunsil because they had to get ready to pay guys like Derek Stingley. Eventually, Danielle Hunter, which they did. They're going to have to pay Will, maybe Nico again in the next year and a half, and CJ. If CJ has a good year next year, they have to pay him some big, big, big money next year. So, like, when that happens, you have to move off of some guys that are past 30 because usually you can bank on guys past 30 eventually regressing. Whenever that regression is, it kind of depends on the guy's body, but in reality, they're kind of the Patriots South to an extent to where Nick Casario spent time in New England. We're going to move off a guy 1 year early versus 1 year late.
That makes sense to me. Now, of course, we've touched on attitude, we've touched on leadership, we've touched on a number of things, but before we let you go, got to take it back to the beginning. There's so many headlines, there's so many narratives that play in before a player even gets an opportunity to do just that, make a case for himself through his game. So is there anything you learned about Stefon Diggs once he joined this locker room that you either weren't expecting, something that he surprised you in, or something that he just does very well that stands guard to his personality that should kind of be illuminated a bit more?
Yeah, I would say you always hear about him as a route runner, and you see it on film, but watching it in person was pretty impressive, just the shiftiness. Obviously, I want to see how he kind of recovers after tearing his ACL. But that shiftiness that he had to be able to create separation was unmatched. And again, like he brings like a next level dog mentality that can permeate throughout the entire offense. And it's pretty contagious, right? Like he's going to bark, and he's going to bark at the other team. I remember at one training camp practice that they had in Cleveland, him and the safety, well, he ended up becoming a nickelback, but Jalen Petrie, the Texans starting nickel, them two just arguing, going back and forth, because Stefon wanted to win some reps, and Jalen obviously was able to get him on a couple of reps, and then he let him know that you can't guard me. You can't guard me. He let him know that for a while, and then I think they went into a competition period, and they were making plays, and Stefon Diggs was letting the defense know. So two things you can expect from Stefon Diggs is ultra competitor and a savvy route runner.
It sounds good to me. And like I said, you put a lot of minds at ease. But more importantly, let's see if the initial excitement that you guys felt down in Houston and the reality of what he can bring to the table. And I like that you mentioned that it wasn't a contact injury, so the recovery could be different in terms of his impact once he's fully healed and ready to go. Translates here to New England. But thank you so much yet again, NFL Nation reporter for the Houston Texans, DJ Bien-Anime, joining us here on Foxborough Rush.
Thank you for having me.